Julia Bowen is a grateful human. She loves yoga and music, and something that recently made her smile is some exciting business developments and some great team meetings. She's the CEO, founder, and owner of Yoga by Julia. Julia, welcome to the Grateful Human podcast.
Thank you. I am grateful to be here.
Right on. Awesome. Set the stage for someone who maybe doesn't know about you and what you do. Just give us some of those proper nouns. What is Yoga by Julia? Tell us a little bit of that story.
Oh, it's a story. Yoga by Julia is it's my yoga studios, and currently I have two studios, but I do plan to open honestly thousands. It's my life calling. So I'm currently in the process of learning how to scale. I live in California, but my studios are in New Mexico, and it's been good because that's simulated the conditions of scaling without the risk of scaling.
Mm,
So it's been small enough that I can learn all my lessons, but big enough to where I'm like, okay, this is why they say to do all the things that people say to do. So
right on.
it's been really fun. It's
I
been
love it.
great.
Yoga itself, I've definitely done my yoga classes in the past. Like it seems like a very emotionally introspective type of activity.
Yeah.
What part does gratitude play
Oh
in
my gosh.
yoga itself and your studios specifically?
It's a huge part of it. I actually one of my favorite ways to open class if I'm teaching a class is think of something thankful for and just like feel it in your entire body, like feel it in your cells. It your thoughts affect your health, your body, and I mean, of course, your whole life. And so I think that gratitude is probably one of the best healing things you can do for your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit. It's healing. No matter
Mm,
how bad no matter how bad life is, there's always an infinite amount of things you can find to be grateful for.
mm,
Changes the tone.
that's amazing. It's probably been a journey over the years with Yoga by Julia. When you look back on from start to now, like what are some of the things that you're most grateful for about the way things have transpired over the course of time?
I am so, so grateful that I took the path that I did. That you could make a movie about how this studio came into being, and it was not what I had planned. It's not like, oh, that's such a beautiful dream. But it's like, no, that was not my dream. It was like the killer of my dreams. Um, because I love music and I wanted to do music. I had a ton of opportunities in the entertainment industry at the time, but I felt that this was my calling, and so I did it. And now in hindsight, there was so much about it that did not make sense to me at the time. Also to everything that led to me finding yoga. And it was a walk of faith and surrender every single step. And I am indescribably grateful constantly all the time, like to the point where I literally bow down to the ground in gratitude on a daily basis, like multiple times a day basis, because it's perfect. Like it's the perfect path for me. And I never would have taken it if I had. So I'm just grateful that God led me there and that I did it. I'm grateful to younger Julia for doing it in spite of not understanding what was going on.
Can you remember your first yoga class ever?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I for about a year before I found yoga, because I had been through hell and back, body, mind, soul, spirit. And so when I got on the other side of that, I was like, well, now I want to share with the world what I learned from all that. And I kept thinking, I was like, they're like Oprah-esque topics that I want to share with the world. And I was like,
Mm,
how do you sum that up? Like, I just kept saying, I need one word that immediately resonates with people that describes what I do. And I was like, and I kept having this vague sense that that word had four letters. And I was like, I racked my brain for a year. And then I took my first yoga class and I was like, this is what I did to heal. This is my one word. Like I can talk about it now without sounding crazy, and people immediately know what it is and it resonates. And I can talk about any aspect of life, body, mind, soul, spirit, via yoga. So yeah, it was
mm.
my first yoga class was very much a like, whoa, everything converged of like a lot of stuff in my life moment.
Did you seek that class out, or was there someone who told you, "Hey, you should try"? Have you tried yoga?
It was a living social, which is kind of like Groupon. It was basically a Groupon, and it's. I think something in me knew that it was going to change my life because I remember the Groupon was for the living social. It was 20 classes for $20. Minimal risk. If I went and didn't like it, I was out $20. It's
Right.
okay. And I deliberated on that. I was just, like where you're like, what? I overthought that decision for like it almost feels like it was a day or two that I sat on it where I was like, I don't know. I hope that I don't regret buying that. It was one of those where I was like, honey, What's the deal? And I think it's because something subconscious knew that it was going to change my life. So it was kind of like, are you ready for your life to change like that? Because it's gonna.
Wow. And then you went from pupil to saying, I would like to teach, or did you go right from pupil to I want to own the studio?
Oh, that whole thing was same vein of the whole thing. I went from pupil who loved it to 5 months later, my teacher and I like were really, we just clicked tight. And she was like, I'm doing a teacher training, Jules. You have to be a yoga teacher. And I was like, I don't want to because I had opportunities in film, modeling, music, all of them like immediately just came onto my lap, which I wasn't even, I just like dipped my toe in to kind of see if it'd work. And it just like, and that's how it's always been for me with music. And so I was like, well, that's what I want to do with my life. And so I don't want to do the teacher training because I would have to, like, I've got all these projects in the works if I want to do them. But she would not relent. And it was a month-long intensive. So it was like, well, it's a month. I'll just do it, the teacher training. And so I did it. I hated every minute of it. I tried to quit 5 times. It was just, I couldn't get a read. Like, I couldn't get a read on myself if
Mm.
this was something, if it was the right decision or not. And so I did that. And then I graduate, like on the last night or two of that training, I went to a dance class in a certain area downtown. And the whole entire time, God just kept being like, ask if they want yoga here, ask if they want yoga here. And I was like, I don't want to teach. I am like trying to get the heck away from this and get back to what I wanted to do. And and it just wouldn't stop. So I was like, okay, fine. Would you guys be interested in offering yoga? And they're like, oh, we were just talking about that this week. We wanted to find a yoga teacher. We would love to. We rent out the space. So that's how I started, was teaching out of a dance studio
Mm.
immediately. Like, it filled immediately. And I was like, well, I'm going to need to find a bigger space. And then same thing, it just kept being like, you need to find a space, you need to, and I was like, I don't know how, I don't like, I had no business background. I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to go do that other stuff. But the momentum just keeps leading over in this direction. So actually through a Groupon a few months later, um, a different Groupon, I met the practice manager for a business that is in the same complex to where my first studio now is. And he was like, somehow he found out that I did yoga. And he was like, you need to open, someone needs to open yeah, someone needs to open a studio across from my clinic. And if you don't, I will. And I was like, okay, well, if ever there was a sign, it's a longer story with even more details where you're like undeniable, where it's like, okay, this is definitely the path to take. So I don't know if I want this to be public or not. The timeline from when I started yoga to when I started my studio was only a little bit over a year.
Wow.
Like, started yoga at my first class, but at the same time, I had been practicing yoga without knowing that it was yoga for years beforehand, because that's how I healed from all the hell that I went through. So it's a long story. That's why I say you could make a movie of the whole thing. Like, it's a really cool story. It's just undeniable thing after undeniable thing. So
What
that's
about what about your personality? Like, what are the characteristics that you're most grateful for that you've seen over the years have like really been some of the things that have helped make you successful?
I would say faith is my biggest thing, faith and surrender, because just moving forward in the midst of things like that where you're like, what? I don't understand. And then getting to this point, which I knew that once I got here, I knew that I would think this when I got here, that I would be like, this is definitely the path I wanted to take. It was more that this was the way harder way to get to where I want to go, because I can still do music from here.
Mm.
Now I have the business skills to know how to do it. And so it's I see how it integrates with everything else that I always wanted to do. Um, and like I said, I mean, that I'm most grateful to God to just making sure that I didn't settle for less.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm grateful to various people in my life who like made sure that I knew that like balanced me out with certain characteristics I didn't have at the time. Like, if I had just gone straight into the entertainment industry at the time, mm-mm, I would have gotten taken advantage of and ripped apart and raped on the road somewhere.
Uh,
Like, it was needed that, like, I needed to learn all of these skills, and I'm so grateful for the people who made sure that I learned them.
yeah, that is getting to one of my favorite questions to ask on these conversations. What are some of those relationships that you look back on and you're just so grateful for?
Actually, Brock is one of them. He was pivotal to help me. Like, he taught me what I needed to, like, I feel like out of every person in the entire world, he understood all of the parts, all of the complex parts that I just told you, like, except he knew it in more detail and knew how to help me navigate through what I was trying to figure out in in a way that was perfect for my business, like exactly what my business needed, but just as much it honored me, like my person, what my person needed. So it wasn't one of those where it's like, yeah, I got results in my business at the absolute expense of myself. It
Hmm.
was like, no, I got results in my business, but even more importantly than that, like I healed in myself and I was able to grow. So he's one of the most honestly pivotal people in my whole story.
Mm.
Um, and the practice manager who I met through Groupon was also very pivotal in that way. His name is Jude. Yeah, but
Well, if
yeah.
you had a message for Jude right now in the moment, what would you say to Jude, just as far as the role that he's played in the gratitude movement?
Ah, look at me now, Jay. That's what I would say. I would say, I mean, just yeah, thank you for everything that he did, believing in me and rescuing me.
That's awesome. It obviously wasn't easy at all points. What's a hard lesson that you've been taught along the way that you're really, really grateful for when you look back on?
I mean, you've probably been able to tell from everything I'm saying that God is the biggest part of my life, and so I would say the hardest things, like obedience. For me, the only time that it was like with the business, it was horrible was when I was there was something that God was specifically telling me to do and give up that I didn't want to, and
Mm,
so I didn't. And it was like hell all the time. It was like I just felt like I was arm wrestling myself, like I was working as hard as I could in the direction that I knew I was supposed to go, and I was also working as hard as I could in the direction I wasn't supposed to go, and so it was exhausting, and it's the only time in my business that things haven't just worked. Like, the whole other 12-year story of the studio, it always just worked, and during that period, nothing worked no matter what I did. So, um, that would be the lesson that I learned.
mm. So if you could go back to the Julia at that
Oh
time,
gosh.
what would that conversation sound like?
I would, like, slap myself and be like, "Honey, you know what to do, and it's like you think that it's not giving you consequences, but it is, and I promise as soon as you just align with what you need to do, it's gonna work again." Yeah, I don't it's one of those where you can't, like when someone is out of line and you're like, "I can't endorse what you're doing," like it's
Mhm.
not the right thing to do, and so it's you're dealing with consequences now. Like that's how I would talk with in love, like not in like guilt or shame, but just in like we got to be real here.
Yeah.
Like, this is why things are not working.
Yep. That's awesome. There's so many common threads like of humans across the world. One is that we all grow up. Like hopefully at some point we all grow up and like I always say when I go if I'm at a Fleece and Thank You event and I'm talking to a second grade class, I always say, I was 7 once and they always laugh at it. But what is it about the way that you were brought up, raised that you're really grateful for when you think about it?
I'm really good. My parents invested a lot into me. My mom stayed at home with us, and so I had a stay-at-home mom like 24/7 investing into me, teaching me stuff. She homeschooled. I was the oldest of 4, so I was the experimental child when it came to schooling, but she homeschooled my other siblings and she like kind of homeschooled me, and so I just like there was a ton of like in the moment like, hey, here's how this science thing works, here's an example of art in real life, like here's all that, like
Mm,
here's it's the 4th of July and we're going to have a history lesson, it's like that's what I was raised with. And my dad too obviously invested a ton into us, and I mean he worked to support a family of 6 on one income, and then he'd come home and like play catch with us in the backyard and read the Sunday funnies with us, and like they were both very, very involved, and I hugely, I mean, I always have attributed a lot of what I got like spit out of the home with. Like I had a lot just already in me because of what they gave me. They
mhm.
were it
Yeah,
was.
and you're one of 4, you said.
Mhm.
Wow. If you had a message to your whole family just about how grateful you are for
Aw.
your journey, what would that sound like?
I just wrote this to my mom like a few days ago, basically saying that like thank you for especially my parents. Like they had to make so many sacrifices to do that. And I was aware even as a kid that they were, but like as an adult now, I'm like, oh my gosh. And they just had their act together. And a lot of, it's like they were just very stable and consistent. And that's now as an adult, I understand how hard it is to do that, especially I would imagine as when you have a family of four and you're doing it on one income. Like it's just hard. Now I understand that what they did was hard. And so my message is just thank you for doing it. And um, it I use what you taught me every day.
Mhm. Awesome. 2020 and 2021 were hard years on a lot of industries, but health and wellness, it was really tough. When you look back on that time, what are you actually grateful for that came out of those couple of years?
I actually am deeply grateful for the whole thing. And I even felt this at the time as much as it was so hard that I had to learn business. I'd been in business for like 8 years. I've actually been an only ever self employed since I was 14. So I've technically been an entrepreneur since I was 14. But the studios, because what I said, they always just worked before. And so I somehow got 8 years into business without actually knowing hardly anything at all about business. And when the pandemic happened, it was like, okay, well, now I have to learn about it. Um, and I did want to eventually learn it. And it turns out that I absolutely love it. Like I'm passionate about it. And I'm empowered now in the very places that I was like specifically unempowered and like scared for it. So, and it was just kind of like a carte blanche to do if you need to make any staff changes or policy changes or any other changes of any sort.
Yeah.
Everybody's in flux right now, so do what you got to do, and nobody's going to say anything because
Mhm.
who knows why it had to happen. So that was nice.
Yeah. You learned business by living it and doing it. Is there any other way? Like when you think about it,
Mhm.
can you actually learn it without doing it?
I've thought many times, I was like, if I had like majored in business in college, all of this would have gone in one ear and out the other, and I would have been annoyed that I was sitting there learning it. And you can learn a certain amount. I think this because we have a yoga teacher training now, and I'm like, you teach the trainees when they're in training, you teach this, and they're like, okay. And then you teach them even 1 month after they've been teaching, they're like, tell me everything. What did you need to, like,
Yeah.
so you can learn some, and I think it's good to get the overview before you do it, but no, doing it,
Mhm.
that's when you really learn it.
Yeah. On the topic of teacher training, you have a this tremendous responsibility to scale the passion you have for the business through your teachers. What are you grateful for about the teachers that work at your studios?
I love this podcast. This is fun because it's like, what are you grateful for about this? What are you grateful for? It's like, man, so much. Teacher training attracts a high quality person. It's like the cream of the crop of all the students. So it's just wonderful people, even like doing the interview calls beforehand, signing people up. A lot of times I'm like, well, that was a very uplifting call. And they just said something I needed to hear. But it's also really fun every year because, of course, there are always 4 or 5 at least standouts of every group. And so I'm always just like, who's going to be our next? And because I do want to grow it, I mean, I do have lenses on my eyes at all times. I am kind of thinking who I might want to hire. And we don't, generally have a lot of openings on the other side unless there's a new studio opening, but it's still, I'm really, really grateful for their help on the other side because they're eager to help. And I've learned with a team, it's good to have those people who are like, they'll drop whatever they're doing right then to go like, not that I want that to be how we do our team, but it's just every person on a team has a role.
Yeah.
And some of the people, like if you get the ones who are the most amazing teacher you ever saw in your life, they probably aren't going to be quite the ones where it's like, if you need me to come at 3 a.m. and drive 6 hours to get there, I'm happy to do that. It's like, so it's
Amazing.
really nice to have both.
Yeah,
To
that's awesome.
yeah.
What's your message to all your teachers if they were watching or listening?
Aw, I love you all. I mean, I love my team. And I tell them this constantly how grateful I am for them. It is a team effort, especially living long distance and especially doing all this through the pandemic with them. I mean, the pandemic was exhausting for 99 point, probably more than 5% of the world. Like most people in the world were exhausted and overwhelmed during the pandemic. And so everyone had to put in just, it felt like we had to work 5 times as hard as normal to get something that was passable, not even like great. And so they were all, all of us were working under those conditions. So I'm so thankful for everything they put in during that time. And it's been really fun now because it's starting, like we're getting to see the fruit of our labor, and it's like pretty normal now. So yeah, I'm just grateful for their excellence and their love.
That's awesome. You earlier said gratitude heals, which is a powerful 2 words to put in the same sentence together. Is there a time where you felt like you've experienced that or seen gratitude heal?
100%. That's how I found yoga. Is I had health problems when I was 19 that the doctors couldn't figure out. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be sick for the rest of my life. And so it was like I became obsessed with nutrition and just healing, and there was a lot and alternative healing and all that stuff. And I started really getting into like say the faith element of it too, and just how does the mind affect the body, and really learning. I'm like, it really affects the body. I don't know if you're familiar with quantum physics, but like quarks and things like that can be even in physics, like with science, it's been proven that your thoughts can affect the
Wild.
way that you're like, yeah, thoughts can affect the way a quark is like, you probably know what it is, but in case somebody doesn't know, it's the smallest known particle of matter. And so at the smallest known particle of matter level, your thought, like they've done experiments that have shown that what you think can affect the behavior of these quarks. So like at the most microscopic possible level, it affects it. So something that I've certainly seen in yoga, like what's true on the micro level is true all the way up to the absolute macro level when it comes to nature and the body and everything. So yeah, gratitude. I'm in the process of making a program for my students right now it's going to be for physical healing. Basically what I did to heal, like when you've done everything that medicine can do and you still need more healing in your body, what can you do? Gratitude is going to be a huge part of that. It's huge.
Mm-hmm. It's got this amazing ability. Like some emotions can exist at the same time. I'm angry and confused, or I'm hungry,
Mhm.
but it's hard to be other things when you're feeling grateful. Like,
I
and
love that. Yes.
how is that possible?
I love that so much. That's so interesting. Yeah, it's like this thing that just wipes all, even when you're sick, even when you're physically like in
Yeah.
agony, like gratitude. Yeah. Because I also, in addition to my health problems, I had debilitating depression. And
Mm,
so gratitude is also like for your mental health as much as even for like anxiety or stress. It's like, well, whatever you're anxious about, if you think of things that you're thankful for, it puts you on a I'm going to talk like a yogi, puts you on a different vibration. It puts you in a different frame of mind. And I always say, actually do a exercise with my teacher trainees where I say, okay, look around the room for the next 30 seconds and I want you to notice everything blue that you see. So they look, they look, they look. And then I have them close their eyes and I'm like, okay, tell me everything you saw that was orange. And they're like, um, I, I, I don't know. Like I wasn't looking for orange. I was looking for blue. And the point of that exercise is what you look for in life is what dominates. That's the only thing, that's what you notice. That's what dominates your reality.
mm.
So if you are looking for things to be grateful for, like it's everywhere and it just dominates and it just basically takes the gloom and it turns it into sunshine, even when you're going through the worst possible thing you could imagine going through.
Wow.
And you need all the strength you can get in those moments, like do it.
Wow. So much of what you said probably encapsulates the answer to this last question, but if you had to summarize it, we ask everyone that's on the show, why is gratitude so powerful? What would be your response?
I actually like what you said, that it's like it's really hard to think of anything else when you're thinking of gratitude. Like it's this like panacea no matter what you're going through, and no one can take that away from you. Like no matter what could happen in life, no one can reach in there and like tell you that you can't be grateful. And no matter how bad everything gets, there's always, like I say, it's infinite amounts of things you can find to be grateful for. So it's readily available and it's universally helpful. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. We're
Mhm.
grateful that you chose to spend some time with us talking about gratitude and sharing everything you did. So thank you very much for just a great conversation.
Same. It was wonderful. I'm
Awesome.
all like, want to go be grateful now.
Spread it. Spread it. It's contagious, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
contagious. Thank you, everyone, for listening to an awesome conversation. Thank you, Julia, for the time, and we'll talk to you all next time.